All stand, please. Please be seated.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Honour. Now, the next set of videos that we'd ask Your Honour to view are those prepared by the Tasmanian Police in company with Mr. Oliver Torrenius on the 6th of January 2013. The transcript of the video recording is document 56 in the court book, and the video recording itself, the set of video recordings are collected as document 57 in the court book. And if I could ask Ms. Law to bring up document 57 and play the videos in order.
Thank you. That was 244 at the top of the picture.
The full name is Matthew Edward Adams. I'm a detective sergeant at the Dunalley investigation branch. It's currently 10:45 a.m. on Sunday, the 6th of January 2012, and I'm at the intersection of the Arthur Highway and Delmore Road at Fawcett. Also present at the moment is Barry Bones and Steve Walkley from the Tasmanian Fire Service in the capacity of fire investigators. I also have Detective Senior Constable John Rafferty with me, and Oliver Torrenius, who is a volunteer firefighter from the Dodgers Ferry Fire Brigade, and he was one of the first firefighters to arrive at the scene of 242 White Hills Road, Fawcett, where we believe the Fawcett fires commenced.
And is that outside 240?
No, Your Honour, that was at the intersection of Delmore Road and the Arthur Highway. I think just a few metres away from where we rendezvoused.
Not far from where we parked.
That's right, Your Honour.
Yes, thank you.
And there's a couple of videos, I think we get to them, numbers 5 and 6, 7 are really just panning shots of that area.
Yeah.
I warn Your Honour that there's not much to hear there.
Thank you.
The full name is Matthew Edward Adams. I'm a detective sergeant currently attached to the Belrive Criminal Investigation Branch. It's currently 10:45 a.m. on Sunday, the 6th of January 2012, and I'm at the intersection of the Arthur Highway and Delmore Road at Fawcett. Also present at the moment is Barry Bone.
That seems to be a copy of the first one, Your Honour.
Continuing on with the interview, still Detective Sergeant Matthew Adams. If you could just introduce yourself, please, Oliver.
Oliver Torrenius, firefighter, Dodgers Ferry Fire Brigade.
Thank you. When did you first become aware of the fire in the Fawcett area?
We were initially paged to the incident at 1:31, and we responded by 1:35. Next question.
When did you actually have a visible observation of the fact that there was a fire in the Fawcett area?
Coming through Old Fawcett Road, heading downhill, we made a visual observation of a column of smoke coming from the White Hills Road area.
Excellent, thank you. currently on the intersection of the Arthur Highway and Delmore Road, Fawcett. With me is Oliver Torrenius. Oliver, when you arrived at this location, what were your observations?
On arrival at this location, the fire crew observed a thick column of smoke on the right-hand side of White Hills Road, which looked like it was gaining momentum in the southeasterly direction.
So, looking down Delmore Road at the moment, the plume of smoke was to the right?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, sort of really you want to be here. Yeah, I wouldn't mind just watching the process to cover off on the roads. It's just a process. I mean,
we've moved location from Arthur Highway, Delmore Road, Fawcett. We're now in the vicinity of 51 Delmore Road, Fawcett, a property which is on the left-hand side of Delmore Road. Oliver, obviously at the moment you can see a large area that's been burnt. What were your observations on Thursday when you drove past this area?
My observations as we proceeded down Delmore Road in this vicinity was that there was no fire activity at that stage. We had a fire estimated in the last 4 weeks that you can see on the furthest hill that spread to the closest hill here that was roughly 150 hectares in size, which was contained to the Delmore Road side of White Hills Road.
Excellent. So this fire, there's been no issues with this area at all in the last 4 weeks?
No.
No. And when you drove past on Thursday, just to be very clear, there was no smoke, there was no smouldering, there were no flames in this area at all?
No, this area was clear of any fire activity.
Excellent, thank you.
found the power fix down now. Find out about it. No, you know, got running seat going. So get it.
One hand and treading on the other, so you can the pass through. Just goes in there and
Our location is now the entrance of the driveway to 242 White Hills Road and 244 White Hills Road. They share the same driveway. Now, Oliver, was this the address that you were originally dispatched to on Thursday?
no, it's not. We were originally dispatched to number 291 White Hills Road, Fawcett. Upon entry to this location, I had been at a escaped hazard reduction burn that had taken place in October at number 244 White Hills Road, and I knew that this was the best access point to gain into the fire as to where I could see the smoke issuing from.
Okay, so the fire you're making reference to at 244 White Hills Road back in October, that was dealt with in October and hasn't been an issue since?
Yes, that's correct. It was started as a hazard reduction escape burn. It was a non-permit period time and was contained to the area of origin.
Okay. On Thursday, when you arrived at this location, what were your observations?
On arrival, there was a thick plume of smoke coming from the direction that the container is, as you can see, in a southerly direction, heading towards Dunalley Road.
So the container you're referring to is the big brown container slightly to the left of the main driveway?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. once again, we've moved location. At the moment, we're approximately 300 metres along the driveway, the co-joined driveway of 242 and 244 White Hills Road. You can see a residential property approximately 200 metres away from where we are at the moment. Upon arrival here, Oliver, what were your observations?
Upon arrival at this location, we had a female occupant of number 242 here at White Hills Road running down the driveway. We actually stopped to see what she was wanting. She claimed that they had had a campfire of some description that had either been utilised in the previous week or in the last few days.
Okay. From the time you got the original pager to arriving here, roughly how long did that take?
Roughly between 15 to 20 minutes to arriving at this point.
And you left from the Dodgers Ferry Fire Station?
That is correct.
Yep. From the Dodgers Ferry Fire Station to this location, did you observe any other fire activity on the way?
No, none at all. All the fire activity was coming from this location.
And how well advanced was the fire upon arrival at the address?
Very well. It had taken off at a steady stream and was tracking in a southerly direction towards Dunalley Road.
What were the weather conditions like?
Quite extreme fire conditions, very windy, very hot.
Okay. Is this the first stage you actually visibly were able to see flames, or were you able to see flames prior to arriving at this location?
At this point, this is where we were able to see visible fire activity.
And the female that you previously referred to, did you observe anyone else with this female, or did you see anyone else at the property within the first 5 to 10 minutes of your arrival?
No, I didn't. The female was the only civilian that I encountered on this road until further crews arrived.
Okay. And just to make it very clear, this fire is in no way in vicinity to where that original fire you referred to back at 244 White Hills Road back in October?
It is very close, but the fire itself was a distance away from the original fire.
Okay, so just to give us a reference, the fire back in October, is that to the left of our shot or to the right of our shot?
It's to the left of the shot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour, and thank you, Ms Law. I think Your Honour can tell that last video was a duplicate of the first one in that batch as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it for the videos, Your Honour.
Thank you.
It's convenient to the court. The plaintiffs now wish to call Mr Oliver Terenius as our first witness.
Daniel, will you take an oath or choose to make an affirmation?
Thanks.
Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I swear.
I swear.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Terenius. Make yourself at home.
Thank you.
A bit of fresh water there for you.
Good.
Mr Terenius, could you please state your full name for the court
My name is Oliver Paul Terenius,
and your address?
178 Lewisham Scenic Drive, Lewisham.
Thank you. And your current occupation?
Firefighter.
Thank you. Now, Mr Terenius, could you tell His Honour, please, when you first joined the Tasmanian Fire Service volunteer wing?
Yeah, I joined the TFS as a volunteer in 1999 and have been a volunteer for the past 22 years and a career firefighter for the past 4 years.
Right, thank you. And in the period between 1999 and 2013, which brigade did you volunteer with?
Dodgers Ferry.
And was it Dodgers Ferry the whole time?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Now, Mr. Torrenius, could I ask you please to cast your mind back to the 3rd of January 2013? And around the middle of the day, could you tell His Honour what you, to the best of your recollection, you were doing?
Yeah, I was at home at my residence in Lewisham, where I received a pager message from our communications dispatch centre to a vegetation fire in White Hills Road, Fawcett.
And Mr. Torrenius, do you recall about what time you received that pager message?
Yeah, look, it would have been close to 2 o'clock.
Right. Now, Mr. Torrenius, you were in court a moment ago while we played some videos that have been recorded by the Tasmanian Police as part of their investigation into this fire. And you may have noted that in the second video that His Honour saw, you were recorded as saying that you received the pager call at about 1:31 or 1:35 p.m. Now, could I ask you, do you recall whether you were provided with any material by the police officers to assist with your recollection prior to recording that interview?
Yeah, I would have recorded received the call log for the incident, which would have listed the times. That morning I was pretty much well sleep deprived, as being on the fire ground for a considerable amount of time.
Right, thank you. Now, could the operator, Mr. Torrenius, we're going to display some documents on the screen. Hopefully they appear okay on the screen in front of you. Could I ask the operator please to bring up Court Book Document 75, which is doc.001.001.0114. And Mr. Torrenius, could I direct your attention to the first 2 entries in that call log?
Yes.
We could enlarge it. And we see there the first 2 entries are at 14:13:31 and then 14:13:35. Now, to the best of your recollection, I'll rephrase that, to the best of your understanding, what time does that denote, expressed as a 12-hour clock?
So that's 2 o'clock, 2:13.
Right, thank you. And so in the video, when you said 1:31 or 1:35, do you have an idea?
Yeah, look, I would have misread the log, and from memory, and I'd most likely have said 13:31 due to possible fatigue.
Thank you, I understand. Now, when you received the page message, Mr. Torrenius, what did you then do?
So after I'd read the pager message, I drove my car to the Dodgers Ferry Fire Station, where I met up with 2 other members from the brigade. We had a quick discussion about possibly what we might encounter, and basically into the truck and on the way to the fire.
All right. Could you tell us, Honour, who were the 2 other members of that brigade?
On that crew we had Perry Sward and Grant Hawkes.
Thank you. Now, to the best of your recollection, Mr. Torrenius, between the time you received the page and the time you got to the brigade station, how much time would have elapsed?
Probably only 3 minutes.
And then from the time you got to the station until you and Mr. Sward and Mr. Hawke left in the brigade truck, again, to the best of your recollection, how many minutes?
I would say 10 minutes.
And then in terms of the travel time to get from the brigade station up to White Hills Road, to the best of your recollection, how many minutes?
It's only taken a few minutes, it's not far.
Thank you. And so do you have any recollection now, Mr. Torrenius, of roughly what time you think the brigade made it to the driveway of 242 White Hills Road?
Yeah, look, it would have been around 25 past 2 to 2:30.
Thank you. Now, as you were travelling north along Old Fawcett Road up toward White Hills, Fawcett and White Hills Road, could you tell His Honour what you observed in terms of any smoke?
Yes, so as you come along Old Fawcett Road, you basically come to the top of the hill and make your way down, and at that point I observed quite a significant smoke column in the sky, which was bent over at the bottom, which would indicate to me that it was a reasonably wind-driven fire. and I knew that we had a significant incident happening.
And Mr. Torrenius, as you come over the hill on the old Fawcett Road that you just described, can you tell us on what direction you're looking?
Yep, so that's easterly direction. And obviously when we arrived, the fire was travelling a south-southeasterly direction.
All right, thank you. Now, do you recall who was driving the truck?
Grand Hawks.
Right, and where were you sitting?
I was in the front passenger seat.
Right, thank you. And you've just referred to the fire that you could see near White Hills Road. Were you able to see any other fire? Or sorry, any other smoke?
There was another significant smoke column rising from the Richmond area, which had no connection with the fire that we were going to.
So if you were coming over the rise, looking east toward the fire that you've described at White Hills Road, I take it that the fire that you've referred to at Richmond would have been to your left?
Yes.
And do you recall whether there were any signs of smoke further to the right of the column that you've said was rising from White Hills Road? Thank you. As you were en route to the White Hills Road fire, do you recall whether you received any other messages from Fire Brigade headquarters?
Yeah, there was messages coming in that there was properties under threat in Dunalley Road, Fawcett. And were you familiar with the Dunalley Road area? Yes, I am.
And I think it's common ground that Dunalley Road was east to southeast of White Hills Road.
That's correct.
Correct? Thank you. Now, when you got to, I think we heard in the video a moment ago that you were initially dispatched to 291 White Hills Road. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Did you go to 291 White Hills Road?
No, we didn't.
Why not?
We were redirected due to the calls that the fire dispatch centre were taking that there was properties under threat at Dunalley Road. So I made the decision that we would redivert to there.
Right. So can I just be clear here, Mr. Torrenius? You were initially dispatched to 291 White Hills Road.
Correct.
You didn't make it to 291.
No.
Where did you go instead?
So, as I stated, we were directed, or I made the decision to go to Dunalley Road,
right.
But further information came to hand and we changed direction back to White Hills Road.
Right. And where did you go then?
To number 242 and 244.
Right. Now, His Honour's seen that the driveway from White Hills Road toward 242 and 244 is a dirt winding track. Can you describe for His Honour, as best you can, to the best of your recollection, what you observed in terms of smoke at the and in what direction as you were driving along that track?
Yeah, so once we turned onto the driveways of 242 and 244, we could get a clearer visual of which way the fire was going, which was a southeasterly direction, south-southeasterly. The smoke plume was increasing, and we also had a female occupant from the dwelling at 242 coming down the driveway.
All right. Now, we heard in the video a moment ago that you said that your fire truck had reached the bottom of a driveway to 242 when you first encountered the female that you've mentioned.
Correct.
And to the best of your recollection, could you tell His Honour what, if any, exchange then occurred between you or any of the other people in the truck and the lady who approached you?
Yeah, well, I asked the driver to stop just so I could have a quick conversation with this person. The female advised that they'd had a fire burning in the last few days, possibly within the last week, and she also pointed in the direction of that vicinity of that fire.
Right, thank you. Now, did you recognise the lady?
No.
Right. Had you been to that area before?
Yes.
And we heard in the interview that you'd attended a fire nearby in October 2012.
That's correct.
And could you tell His Honour where that October fire had occurred?
Yep, that was to the left of the residence where the female was leaving or coming to meet us from.
Right, so do you mean to the east of 242
Yes.
White Hills Road?
Correct.
Do you recall the address at which the October fire had occurred?
It was number 244 White Hills Road.
And using compass points, north, south, east, west, do you recall where the October fire had started at 244?
Yeah, it was in the southeasterly area.
Right, thank you. Now, you've mentioned that the lady who approached the fire truck mentioned that there'd been a fire and had pointed in a general direction. Do you recall what, if anything else, was said between anyone in the truck and the lady?
No, I can't recall anything from the other members in the vehicle. I was basically doing most of the talking, so we had to move on pretty quickly.
Right, why was that?
The fire was threatening number 244 White Hills Road, so that was my priority to get up there to protect their property.
As you were driving along the track, had you had any further communications with headquarters?
Yes, we had. We had multiple resources attending the incident, which were directed to go to the Untitled Road end.
Right, thank you. So after you spoke with the lady that you just mentioned, could you tell His Honour where you and your crew then went?
Yep, so we travelled the track past number 242 up to number 244 White Hills Road. As stated before, we undertook property protection there for a considerable amount of time, where I was making decisions in regards to resourcing and trying to come up with a plan of attack, if you could say.
And then, Mr. Torrenius, when you got up to the residence at 244, do you recall, again using compass points, where the brigade truck was stationed?
Yeah, the truck was located basically on the eastern side, and the fire was still moving in the southeasterly direction.
Right. And now, could you describe to the best of your recollection what observations you made of fire activity in the area to your right, that is further to the west, back between toward 242, across to what was in front of you, and then further across to your left, that is further east?
Yeah, sure. So once meeting with the female occupant of 242, we made our way further up the track towards 244. There was no real fire activity around the residence of 242. The fire had already moved quickly and progressed southeasterly towards number 244, and the fire had actually passed number 244 White Hills Road as well.
So when you said a moment ago that you spent some time on property protection, which address is that?
At number 244.
Yeah, but the fire had already
The
passed.
fire had already passed, however, there was still burning
Yes.
around the
And
house.
so your truck was parked towards the near the house, or
Yes.
on the eastern side.
That's correct.
And the fire was moving in the southeast.
Correct.
And Mr. Torrenius, what did you observe in terms of hopping or spotting activity from the fire?
Yeah, so the fire had moved into heavy vegetation and climbing trees and pretty much crowning towards Dunalley Road.
Right. And just because it's possibly the first time the term has been used in this proceeding, could you explain to His Honour what you mean by crowning?
Okay, so that's when the ground level fire moves up the trees, we call ladder fuels, and then moves into the canopy of the treetops and is moved along by the strong winds and heat.
Now, Mr. Torrenius, there's been a question in the proceeding as to whether there was a separate fire that had started before the fire at 242 White Hills Road and had started somewhere to the east of 242 White Hills Road and closer to the properties at the north end of Inala Road. Could you tell His Honour, to the best of your recollection, what observations you made of fire activity through that area that bear on your assessment of whether there was a second fire front?
Yeah, I can't say feasible that there was any fire activity in that vicinity. I know the area reasonably well, living there my whole life. A fire in those conditions on that day, if it had started further on from the fire in White Hills Road, it would have been significantly visible from multiple areas, and it would have moved in a very fast and rapid rate from its point of origin.
And in what direction do you?
It would have moved in the same direction, so in a southeasterly direction.
All right, thank you. At the time you first observed the fire from a vantage point at 244 White Hills Road, Mr. Turenius, do you recall whether the flames had crested over the ridge that is visible to the south of 244 White Hills Road?
As stated before, the fire activity was quite high. It had already, as I said, got into the top of the trees and was moving quickly and spreading rapidly.
Right. And
so you're saying yes, or are you saying that because of that you couldn't tell?
I'm saying that yes, the fire had,
Yes, okay. Had crested the ridge.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Turenius, in terms of the spotting activity that you referred to a moment ago, can you estimate how far you saw the spot fires igniting in front of the main front?
I wouldn't be able to see the spot fires from my point.
Right, and why was that?
Because I'm at the tail end of the fire.
Right.
So, yeah.
I see. So, because you're behind the fire front, you can't see where the spotting is being thrown further ahead.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Turenius, you were in court while we played the videos that I mentioned a few moments ago. In light of, apart from the question of the time of your first page message, having heard what is recorded from you in respect of those videos, is there anything else that's you now remember about that fire that causes you to want to correct anything in what you said in the video footage?
It's basically the original times that I stated in the video. They were definitely out. But as for the fire itself, the direction of travel and everything else, it's how I've stated in all my statements and here today.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Do you recall how long you were at 244 White Hills Road?
It would have possibly been 30 minutes to 45 minutes.
Right. And was yours the only truck that you saw at 244 while you were there?
Yeah, we did have one more truck arrive, which was from the Midway Point Fire Brigade.
Right. And do you recall about how long after you got there that the Midway Point Brigade arrived?
Possibly 10 to 15 minutes.
Right. And when you left 244 White Hills Road, was that with your crew?
No, it wasn't.
So could you explain to His Honour what happened and how you came to leave 244?
Yep, so our District Officer, Andrew Skelly, was mobilised not long after we received our pager message, and he came directly to number 244 to meet with me, and that's where I left with him in his vehicle towards Dunalley Road.
Right, and so could you tell His Honour what path you followed to get ultimately back to Dunalley Road?
Yep, so we took the same driveway from number 244 back out to White Hills Road.
Did you go up to the residence at 242 on that day?
No.
And when you got around, can you recall now roughly how long it took you to get from 244 White Hills Road back to Dunalley Road?
Between 5 and 10 minutes.
Right. And where did you go to on Dunalley Road?
Right to the end of Dunalley Road, to where the fire was reported to be moving through.
Right. Do you know who owns that property?
I believe it's a Lawrence.
Right. One of the Lawrences.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you got to the Lawrence property at the end of Dunalley Road, do you recall, His Honour's heard evidence that there's a Lawrence on the left and a Lawrence on the right. Which property did you head to, the one on the left or the one on the right?
I was located at the one on the left.
Right.
The one furthest up.
Correct.
And when you got to that property, Mr. Terenius, could you explain to His Honour again in as much detail as you recall what observations you made as to fire activity, what it was and where it was going?
Okay, so we'd already had multiple crews located at that site, and on our arrival the fire had pretty much passed that area, that vicinity, and we had crews in property protection mode and containing some of the fires around that property.
And where had the fire gone once it had passed that property?
So the fire had moved past that property in a southeasterly direction towards Gangels Road.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Terenius, if you could please picture in your mind the area immediately to the west of that Lawrence property at 244. So that is the distance generally back in the direction of White Hills Road. What did you observe in terms of the intensity of fire activity through that area when you arrived?
Yeah, so as stated before, the fire had pretty much passed that vicinity already, but it was thick vegetation, so the fire would have moved and did move quickly through there.
Right. And in terms of crowning activity, have there been crowning through that area to your observation? Right. All right, thank you. Did you see anybody, any civilians in that area to the left of the Lawrence property?
No.
While you were there?
Only the people that I saw on that day in that vicinity were other TFS resources.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Terenius. That's all you're on.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Reid.
Yes, thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Terenius, we've got a log that hopefully you can see on the screen in front of you. Your evidence was that you would have received the pager message close to 2 p.m. That shows a page at 2:13:31. Does that document set the time for you, or do you think that you got a page earlier than that?
No, this is definitely correct as what's stated here in front.
Thank you. And from the time you got the page until the time that you arrived at the property where you spoke with the lady,
Yep.
about 15 minutes passed?
I would say so, yeah.
Right. So we can put your arrival time at about 2:30.
Correct.
Thank you. Now, can I just hop in your fire truck for a moment and leave Dodgers with you? You drove along Old Fawcett Road and you come over the peak or the brow of the hill at Gillingbrook Road.
Correct.
Now, that road, Old Fawcett Road, runs in a general northerly direction, and Fawcett is out to your right as you come over there.
Correct.
And what you saw was a column of smoke, something somewhat to the east of Fawcett.
Yes, correct.
And in the direction of it, you've described as Whitehill Road, but behind that, further on, is Dunalley Road.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you. Now, when you made a statutory declaration on the 6th of January 2013, that's correct?
Correct.
Yes. And in that, you said that when you drove up the shared dirt driveway to number 242 and 244, I could see an area of burnt vegetation on the southeast side of the house at 242. So that was on your right?
Just trying to...
Yes, take your time.
Thinking of that, so if you can just say that again.
Yes, I could see an area of burnt vegetation on the southeasterly side of the house at 242. The question was, that's on your right.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. And you said, and that was correct, what you said there was correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. The fire had gone through here and was starting to go down the hill towards Dunalley Road, and that's your memory?
Correct.
Thank you. It extended up the side of the driveway which leads to 244.
Correct.
I could see up that drive, the front extended for at least 200 metres.
Correct.
And you in fact drove past that front to do your property protection.
Yeah, the front had already passed that house, that residential property.
Well, The driveway up to 244 is about 800 metres, isn't it? Yes. And you saw at the bottom of before you undertook that drive up to 244, that the front extended for at least 200 metres.
Yep.
Yes. And you therefore had to drive past that front. It was on your right as you drove up the hill.
When we talk about a front, I'm talking about the width of the fire front.
Yes.
Not the distance from the origin.
Yes, yes. Well, you didn't know where the origin was, did you?
No.
No. So you couldn't be talking about that. No. So you've said the front extended for at least 200 metres. That is up the road towards 244. That's what you're describing.
Right.
Yes. Correct?
Correct.
Yes. And therefore you drove past that to get up to the property. Didn't you?
I'm having a bit of trouble understanding the area at the moment.
I'm not sure of the terminology either, whether Mr. Trenius is saying that the front means the side.
Yes, well, it's Mr. Terenius's terminology. So, what did you mean then when you said the front extended for at least 200 metres?
So I'm describing the front of the fire from the visual point from number 244. I'm estimating how wide the fire front is.
How wide?
How wide it is.
I see. So
Yeah.
it's 200 metres wide.
Yes.
Right. Now, your view from where you parked at 244 is not a clear view down to the south. It's over a brow, is it not?
Correct.
So what you can see then, I suggest, is more smoke than fire.
You could say that, yeah, correct. Yeah.
And when you say that the fire had passed, what you mean is that the smoke had passed.
No, the fire had passed that property.
Did you see the fire?
Not from that,
No.
from the property.
No. So what you've seen is the smoke.
I've seen the smoke as well as the front of the fire
So you've
because
seen...
it's crowning through the trees.
Thank you. And you saw that crowning while you were at the property at 244.
That's
after
correct.
you parked your truck.
That's correct, yes.
Stuart, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Reid. Anything in re-examination?
A couple of points, Your Honour. Mr. Terenius, could I ask you to cast your mind back to the exchange that you had with the lady who came down to see the fire truck? From where the truck was parked, do you recall what direction it was toward the residence at 242 White Hills Road?
You're talking about where she indicated that the fire may have started?
No, from where you were stopped in the truck, what direction was it to the residence?
The actual fire?
No. From where the truck was stopped and you were talking to the lady, there was a driveway going up the hill, correct? And could you see the residence at the top of the hill?
That's correct.
Right.
Sorry.
So from where the truck was stopped, what direction was it to the residence?
So that was more in a southwesterly direction.
Okay, thank
Which
you.
is what I gathered from his answer to Mr. Reid's question about it being to the right, unless the truck had been reversed up.
Yes. Now my question, Mr. Terenius, is you've said in answers to me before that you did not go to the residence at 242 White Hills Road on the 3rd of January, correct?
That's correct.
And bearing in mind that your truck was to the northeast of the residence at 242 White Hills Road, my friend took you to the passage in the statutory declaration that says that you could see an area of burnt vegetation on the southeasterly side of the house at 242.
Correct.
And so when you say southeasterly side of the house, do you mean the southeasterly side of the house or southeast of where you were stopped?
Southeasterly side of the house.
Right. Okay. And from where you were at the bottom of the driveway, you could see the driveway going up the hill to the house.
Correct.
And relative to the location of that driveway, can you tell His Honour where was the area of burnt vegetation that you're referring to there?
So from the area of the residential dwelling there, the burnt vegetation started to the southeast of that building.
Right. And Mr. Terenius, that was an observation you could make from where the truck was stopped at the bottom of the driveway, is that right?
Your Honour, this is verging on cross-examination.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to grant leave, and I'll permit you to re-examine, permit you to cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honour. So, Mr. Terenius, sorry, just to be clear, that observation you've just described was the observation you made from where you were stopped while speaking to the lady, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, next, in relation, my friend asked you some questions about the width of the front, and you drew a distinction between that and the distance from what you referred to as the point of origin. Could you, using the terminology of the front of the fire and the flanks of the fire, could you explain to His Honour what you mean by the front having been 200 metres in distance?
Okay, so when we talk about the front of the fire being 200 metres wide, I'm talking about how far the fire has crossed through vegetation and how wide it is. And when we talk about the flanks, we're talking about the sides to that front. So the left and right of the front of the fire.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Terenius, while you were at 244 White Hills Road, my friend asked you what you could see in terms of flames, and you gave some answers referable to flames or the fire, and then you also referred to crowning. So keeping in mind that distinction, could you tell His Honour what you could see from 244 White Hills Road in terms of flames generally?
Yeah, so from my visual perspective from number 244 is that I could see the flames in the tree canopies in the vegetation to the southeast of the dwelling, and also considerable burning at low ground level as well.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honour. Thank you.
Anything arising out of the question asked upon your objection, Mr.
No, there's not. Thank you.
Mr. Terenius, just so I can understand your statement that you saw a patch of burned vegetation to the southeast of the house. What, in your view, is the orientation of the house? In which direction does it face?
Sort of faced in an easterly direction.
Right.
The front of the house.
Right. And so where does that put the axis of the house in terms of the length of the house, I suppose, on your view?
So from memory of the house, like I said, eastern orientation, but with the driveway parallel with the house.
Yeah. So your view is it faces east?
Yes.
So it's upon that basis that we're to assess your comment about the patch of burned vegetation being to the southeast of the house.
Correct.
Yes, thank you. All right, anything arising, Mr. Reid?
No, thank you.
Mr. Armstrong?
No, thank you, Your Honour.
All right, you'd like Mr. Terenius to relieve?
Yes, please, Your Honour. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Terenius, for your attendance. You're relieved on the trial, which means that you're free to go because you're perfectly free to stay if you want to.
Thank you.
Proceedings.
Your Honour, Mr. Cox will take the next witness.
Yes, please, Your Honour. Call Perry Clifford Sward. Yes.
We can take an oath or the Bible or choose to make an affirmation.
Oh, affirmation, thank you.
Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I affirm.
I affirm.
Thank you. Please listen.
Thanks, Mr. Sword. Make yourself comfortable there. I think that is a fresh bottle of water and cup next to you, so feel free.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Mr. Sword, could you please state your full name
Perry Clifford Sword,
and your address?
15 Adelphi Road, Claremont.
And you're recently retired, I understand.
Yes, that's correct.
Used to work at the Zinc Works.
I did.
Yep. And you also recently retired as a TFS volunteer.
Yes, I have.
When did you start as a volunteer with the TFS?
14 years ago.
Okay. That was at the Dodgers Ferry.
No, midway point I started. Yeah, midway point.
As at 2013, were you with Dodgers Ferry?
I was, yeah, with Dodgers Ferry. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Well, I want to take you back to that time, being the 3rd of January 2013. You recall receiving a page on the fire calls?
Yes.
Yep. And do you remember about what time that was on the day?
I would have been around about 2:15,
Okay.
14:15.
And where were you when you received it?
At home.
Okay. And what did you do?
Proceeded to the fire station down at Dodgers, which is probably a 2-minute drive.
Okay. And when you got there, were there other officers there?
I think there was Oliver Terenius was there, and Grant Hawkes was on his way. Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do? Kit up and get ready?
Yeah, got in our Bushfire gear.
Yep.
Struck and got into the truck.
Okay.
4-1. Yeah.
Grant Hawkes, I presume, had arrived by then.
He had arrived by then. Yes.
And he was driving?
Grant was driving. Yes. Yes.
Where were you in the back seat?
I was in the back seat. Yep.
And where were you dispatched to?
White Hills Road.
Okay. And just in as best you can, how long did it take you to get from the station to White Hills Road?
Probably around about 8 minutes, I'd say. Around about. So not very long.
On the way, did you make any observations of smoke?
Yes, we could see plumes of smoke, white smoke and black smoke.
Just to help us on, where were you when you saw that?
I was on Arthur Highway.
Before the turn off to Delmore Road?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And where approximately in your best estimate was it coming from?
To us, it was heading east. It was heading
On the
easterly,
wind?
so it was northeasterly. Yeah.
And the wind that day was from where?
From the north. Yeah.
And its speed, I know it's a generalisation, but over the day.
40 kilometres, I'd say.
Okay. So you went up White Hills Road. Do you recall seeing anyone on your trip up there?
Yes, we saw a young lady, blonde lady, come running. She came running up to our truck.
Okay. Do you remember which address that was or what number?
244, 242.
242.
242.
Okay. Yeah. And so the lady, you saw her. She was on the right, I gather, as you.
Yes, she was.
And you guys stopped the truck?
Truck, yeah.
Yep. And she approached you?
Yes.
Yep. And what exchange took place, do you remember?
She was in a bit of a flat, and she said that she suspected that, well, she saw the fire and she was a bit concerned where it was heading. So it was heading towards 244, which is further up the hill there. So, yeah.
Did she say anything else?
She said it may have, well, we did questions, just said, where do you think what's happened? She said, I think it may have started from a campfire that she had a few days previous. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what did you guys do? Did you say anything in response?
No, we proceeded up the hill, or went up the hill on our truck to 244 because that was the house that was in the most danger of the fire.
What it appeared at that point in that location, could you see fire in the area?
Seen mostly smoke.
Yep.
And we could see some fire heading up towards 244.
So this is at the bottom of the driveway of
Yes.
the woman's house?
Yeah.
Okay. So you then travelled up to 244, I gather?
Yes.
Yeah. Did anything happen on the way?
No. We just proceeded up there and went into asset protection.
Okay. That was the order, was it?
That was the order, yes.
Okay. So you just help us when you first got up there. your observations of fire, not smoke, in the area. I want to ask you about them, but first, can you just tell me where you first made them from, referable to the house at 244?
It would have been on the southern flank. We were working on the southern flank, so yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And what could you see?
Well, the fire was actually going across the paddock. It was small grasses and bracken fern, and the fire was racing across that towards the house. So.
Right, okay. Yeah. It was coming towards you, was it?
Yeah, okay.
And was there a noticeable or identifiable head of the fire?
Not the major front. No, it was just the flank we was fighting. So.
Right, okay. Yeah. So you were working the flanks of this fire.
Yeah.
Did you though make an observation of the front or the head? Could you see where it was?
No, we could only see mostly the black smoke, which indicates a pretty fierce fire. So, okay.
And
did you say black smoke?
Yes, black smoke. Yes. Yeah.
And I'll ask you again, the wind at that time from the west and
northeasterly. It was heading.
And at speed?
40 km, probably 40 kilometres an hour.
Yeah. So from is that the area where you basically were working and fighting the fire?
Yes, it was.
And how long did you stay there for?
We were there for about a half hour to an hour, protecting that property.
And could you perhaps just explain in general terms to His Honour the progression of the fire as you saw it from that area?
From where we were, we'd blackened it out, not down.
On the flank?
On the flank, yes, and blackened it out.
Well, speaking of blacking out,
yes.
we're back. But the fire, which was still burning, where was that travelling?
That was on the eastern side, and it's heading easterly, northeasterly. Yeah.
Are you familiar with that country, that area?
Not really, no.
Were you aware Untitled Road was beyond and to the southeast?
Yes, I realise that. Yeah.
If I suggested that there's a ridge between where you were and Dunalley Road, would you understand what I was talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would, yeah.
By reference to that ridge, did you see fire activity cresting up onto the top of that ridge while you were there?
No, I didn't personally know.
Within that hour or so you were there?
Yeah, because we was concentrating on the role we had and sort of thing. We knew the fire was there because of the smoke and so forth. But,
Good. And were you then redeployed?
We were.
To
Gainesville Road. Gainesville Road.
Thank you, Mr. Sword. Nothing further, Your
Honour. Thanks, Mr. Cox. Mr. Reid.
Thank you. Mr. Sword, Gainesville's Road. Do you remember what time you got there?
We was there for about an hour, so it would have been around about 1600, 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock.
And fire had already gone through there to Mother Brown's Bonnet by that stage?
Yes.
Was it well burnt up onto Mother Brown's Bonnet when you arrived?
I'm not real sure about that. I'm sorry there.
It's okay. Thank you. When the lady came down and spoke to you about the campfire, she also said to you she thought they had put it out.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Thank you. When you were speaking with the lady, you were able, or perhaps just slightly after that when the truck moved on, you were able to see that the fire was moving away from the house, that's the house to your right, in a southeasterly direction, and you were happy that the house, this lady's house, wasn't under threat.
That's correct.
Thank you. As you turned to go up the drive to 244, it's about 800 metres up there.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yep. You could see flames travelling up the hill ahead of you, but before 244.
Yes.
And it's those flames that you set yourself up to meet.
Yeah, the flank of the fire. Yeah, the main front there.
Could it please?
Yes, thanks, Mr.
Nothing in
Cox.
re-examination, Your Honour.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sword, for your attendance. You've free to go. You're relieved on the trial, but you can stay and watch if you want to.
No, no, it's all good. I've got to pick up my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, Your Honour, a call Grant Hawkes.
Just come across this side, Mr. Hawkes, if you like. This is what we call the witness box.
Stand please, until I ask you whether you would like to take an oath or choose to make an affirmation. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I swear.
I swear.
Please be seated.
It's a fresh water and glass plastic cup there next to you if you feel the need, Mr. Hawkes.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkes, could you please tell me your full name
Grant Ethel Hawkes,
and your address
21 1070 Donalley,
and your current occupation?
Supervisor, Hobart City Council.
And you've been a volunteer member of the Dodgers Ferry Brigade, Fire Brigade, since 1995?
Yes.
Still a member?
Yes.
Yep. And you recall, obviously, while you're here, and taking you back in time to the 3rd of January 2013, you remember getting a page from the TFS?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember what time of day, roughly, that was?
A bit after 2 p.m, quarter past or something.
And you were at home at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. And no doubt moved into the station as quickly as you could?
Yes.
Yeah. How long did it take you?
3 or 4 minutes, yes.
Sure. And you kitted up, I gather, in preparation?
Yes, and the gears at the station, you put that on when you get there.
Yeah. And who was there?
Oliver Torrenius and Perry Sward.
Okay. And what vehicle were you going to use to respond?
Medium tanker, which is called a 4-1 unit.
Yeah. And you, I think you were the driver, weren't you, for
Yes.
that mission? Yeah. Mr. Torrenius in the front, Mr. Sward in the back.
Yes.
Yeah. And do you recall how long it took you approximately to get to White Hills Road? And when I say get to White Hills Road, I mean the junction where the driveway is for 224 and 242, 244. Just approximately
10, 12 minutes or something.
Yeah. And on the way to that location, did you make any observations of smoke in the area?
Yes, as we were driving, it was on that side of my vision in the front.
Oh, sorry, where
driving
were you when you first saw it?
Turning into Delmore Road, I think I would have seen it first.
Okay, so on the Arthur Highway.
Yep, turning left into Delmore Road, which heads east.
Yep. And so in what direction was the smoke? To the east?
Yes.
Okay. And could you describe what it looked like?
I can't really recall the colour and that.
That's all. So you then got up to 242 White Hills Road, and it was there you saw a lady. That's correct, isn't it?
I turned off White Hills Road, and it's a quite long driveway, and Brocol goes down the dip and then up, and the lady was coming down the dip towards us.
Yep. Sure. Yeah. And was it at 242 that you saw the lady?
I didn't know the number then.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, perhaps you can just tell us as best you remember it, the conversation you and the others had with her.
Yeah, but we were going there because that we had access to see where the smoke in it was. She stopped us and asked us to go and make sure her neighbour's house is okay.
Yep.
and then she said they had a campfire a few days earlier and she thought the fire had come from there.
Did she volunteer that, or did somebody?
Yes, we didn't. No.
Okay. So you then go on to 244?
Yes.
Yeah. And when you get to 244, what observations do you make of where the fire is? Just fire, not smoke, but fire, or what?
The fire was coming up the bank towards the neighbour's house and back towards her a little bit.
Yeah.
Back towards her. The front of the fire had already gone down the gully further.
Right, I see. So
But it was just the flanks coming up slowly.
right, so they were creeping up to you at 244. And where were you when you're making these observations referable to the house at 244?
To this, I assume it'd be the side of it.
Yep.
Where if you say in the back of the house goes on in the gully, then it's the side.
So the head's down in the gully,
Yep.
and you're fighting the flanks. How long were you fighting the flanks for?
I would have been there about half an hour, I assume. That was Perry and I.
You say the front had passed, meaning they had passed this house.
Yes.
Yeah. So in your mind, the front wasn't a threat to this house.
No.
All right.
At this stage.
But by the time you left, or could you make observations of where the front was?
Further that way, I'm not sure what was there.
That's all right. Further.
They would have
Can you give us
followed
the
the gully,
direction?
assume easterly with the wind.
So I was moving easterly through the gully.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And sorry, I think I might have asked you this, but just remind me, how long were you there at that location for?
I think it would have been probably half an hour, maybe.
And you were then redeployed
Yes.
to where?
This was Perry and I, Oliver Torrenius had gone with Andrew Skelly.
Yep.
And I think they might have tasked us to go to the next driveway or along. It was
In White Hills Road?
no, sorry, go back to the Arthur Highway.
Yes.
Turn left and go down towards the mill, and there's a road that goes up to the property up there, and that probably would have been the next stop.
We're talking about Gandrels Road or Inala Road?
No, I think it's just a driveway to a property. Nala Road's around further,
Okay. Well,
Ganges further again.
well, I'll ask you, in that location, did you make any observations of the fire?
No, it's like the property was like a knoll, I should call it, with a house and stuff on the top, and the fire was going down the gully wall opposite there, and it wasn't threatening that property at the time.
Okay. And just generally, the conditions that day, heat and wind?
Hot and wind, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hawkes. Nothing further.
Mr. Root?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hawkes, do you remember that you made a statutory declaration about 6 days after this fire?
Yes.
Yeah. And you recall, do you, when you pulled up and you were talking to this lady,
Yes.
you could see smoke to your left at about 10 o'clock.
Yes, probably.
Yep. And that is if 12 o'clock straight ahead from the fire truck,
Yep.
you could see it out at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, can you help with the geographical direction in which your truck was facing?
But we would have been southeast. The road was easterly and we turned right.
Yep.
So she was southeast.
So when we're talking 10 o'clock, we're talking very much southeasterly, maybe east southeasterly.
10 o'clock.
At your left,
Yep.
that's where you could see the smoke.
If that's what, I can't recall it. I remember seeing some that which,
You can't recall exactly where it was?
no,
I see. All right. And you agree that you saw the fire moving away from the property that this lady occupied, from that property, in a roughly easterly direction?
it had already, I didn't see it go, the front move, it had already gone out, the flanks were still live coming up the hill.
Yes, when you were up at 244?
Yes.
That was, yes. Yes, but please.
Thanks, Mr. Reid. Anything
Nothing
arising?
arising, thank you.
Mr. Sward, I'm sorry, Mr. Hawkes, just before you go, you say you were redeployed to a driveway, and there was a house on the knoll, and it wasn't under threat.
Yes.
Where did you end up? Where did you go after that?
We spoke to the residents there, and they were happy for us to go. And our 5-1 unit, which is a Toyota Land Cruiser crewed by 2, called us to Gangers Road.
Right. So there was only one stop between 244 and Angels Road,
That we stopped
and that
at.
was the house on the knoll.
Dunalley Road is before Gangers Road, but we didn't.
You didn't go there. Yeah. Thanks. Anything arising, Mr. Cox?
No, thank you.
Mr. Reid?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Hawkes, for your attendance. You're perfectly free to go or stay.
Thank you, Your Honour. The next witness for the plaintiffs is Mr. Butler, Anthony Thomas Butler.
Can you take an oath on the Bible or choose to make an affirmation? Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I swear.
I swear.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Cutler. Make yourself comfortable there.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Mr. Armstrong.
Mr. Butler, could you state your full name for the court, please,
Anthony Thomas Butler,
and your address
9 7 Mile Beach Road, 7 Mile Beach.
and your occupation?
I'm a plumber.
Thank you. And Mr. Butler, you are currently the Brigade Chief for the 7 Mile TFS Volunteer Fire Brigade, is that right?
Correct.
How long have you been a volunteer firefighter with the TFS?
34 years.
And over the course of your 34 years, what positions have you held within the volunteer service?
I started off as a firefighter, progressed to 3rd officer, 2nd officer, and then brigade chief.
And do you recall when you were made Brigade Chief?
First time was in 1992.
Right.
4 years.
Thank you. And were there other occasions?
Yeah, re-elected in 2000 and still current.
So you've been Brigade Chief since 2000 until the present day?
Yeah.
And that's all the time at 7 Mile?
Correct.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Butler, have you been provided with training in the course of your time as a volunteer with the Tasmanian Fire Service?
Yes, yes.
Could I ask the court operator in a moment, perhaps I'll ask you the question first, Mr. Butler. That training has included training in fire scene preservation, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And also investigation of the causes of wildfires.
Yeah, that was a course that ran with another course, was an introduction to it.
Right, thank you. Could the operator please bring up, it's part of document 31, but it's only the annexes that I'm seeking to tender, Your Honour. So the document I'd ask to be brought up is WTS.001.001.0017. So it starts at 15, that's right. So it's document, Court Book document 31, Ms. Law. That's it. But could you please display the third page in, which starts at 0017? Thank you. Now, Mr. Butler, do you recognise that as a listing of the training modules that you'd completed with the TFS?
That looks okay, yeah.
Right, thank you. And have you had a chance to look at that training list recently?
I don't often look at it, no.
Right, okay. Could I ask you to just run your eye down it, and do you, if the operator could scroll down the listing slowly as is convenient to you, could you tell His Honour whether you can recall which of the various units that are listed there is the one that involved the introduction to fire?
It'd be TFS 188, intro into incident scene preservation.
Right, thank you. So that's about halfway down the page that's presently shown on screen, and it was a module that you attained in 2018. Could we perhaps go to the end of the listing, which is chronologically the earliest point in time, and work our way up? And so could we go to page 0029? See there another 2018 module, Mr. Butler. And the reference there to incident scene preservation. Could the operator please then take us to page 0025? And in about the middle of the page, there's another two entries there that refer to record and report details of incident scene from 2006, and then one from 2014. So do you see those, Mr. Butler?
I do, yeah.
Now, to the best of your recollection, had you completed the training in Introduction to Fire Scene Preservation before 2013?
I don't recall, I can't remember.
Right, thank you. Now, could I ask you to cast your mind back to the 3rd of January 2013? Do you recall what you were doing at about the middle of the day?
Middle of the day, I think I was probably at home. A hot windy day like that, sometimes if I haven't got not much work to do, I'd be at home maybe, hoping we don't get a fire call.
Right. Yeah. And on that day, do you recall that you were paged to attend a fire?
I do, yes. Yeah.
And do you recall about what time?
I thought it was about 3 o'clock, but I wouldn't have looked at the time properly.
Okay. Are you familiar with the TFS incident call logs?
Yes.
Could the operator please bring up Court Book Document 75? And could we go across to the next page? And could we stop at the 3rd of January for the timestamp at 14:35? So can we go up the screen, please? So at about two-thirds of the way down, about two-thirds of the way down the screen, Mr. Butler, there's a 14:35:08 7 Mile Beach.
Yep.
And does that accord with your recollection of about the time that you're
somewhere around there?
Page. Thank you. Now, after you received that page, what did you then do?
Obviously got my vehicle and proceeded to Samuel Wedge Fire Station.
Can I just pause you there? About how long does it take you to get from home to the station?
2 to 3 minutes. Yeah.
And once you got to the station, was there anybody else there?
I think Adrian was there, Adrian Cotton. Can't remember whether Matthew was there before me or after me, and Robert was a little bit later.
Can I just pause you? Matthew is your son, Matthew
Matthew,
Butler?
yeah.
And who's Robert?
Robert McManus.
Right, thank you.
Another volunteer.
And do you recall about how long you were at the brigade house before you left?
Probably long enough to put our turnout gear on. Robert was running probably he may have just pulled up as we were thinking about going, so probably took a few more minutes longer.
And so, from the time that you arrived at the 7 Mile Brigade House until the time that the crew was on its way to Whitehills Road, about how many minutes would you estimate?
A big pardon?
How many minutes would you estimate that you'd been at the Brigade House?
Could have been 5 minutes, 5, 6 minutes.
And then how long's the drive to get from 7 Mile Brigade House to...
I think he said about 12 minutes or so.
Right. And can you tell His Honour what route you take to get from 7 Mile up to Whitehills Road in Fawcett?
Down Surf Road, Pittwater Road, Tasman Highway to Arthur Highway, and then Arthur Highway to turn off into Whitehills Road, where it turns into Whitehills Road.
And who was driving?
Adrian Cotton.
Right. And where were you in the vehicle?
I'd be in the front passenger.
And as you were driving toward the dispatch point that you'd been called to in Fawcett, can you tell His Honour what you recall in terms of any observations you made of smoke?
Just a good plume of smoke going, and it was probably whitish, greyish, heading easterly.
Right. And so as you were, when you first saw that plume of smoke, what direction were you relative to Fawcett? South-west, south-east, due south, due west?
Well, when we're driving along the Arthur Highway, I suppose we're heading eastish, weren't we?
Right. And does that mean you were west of the fire?
Beg pardon?
Does that mean you were west of the plume of smoke?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you recall how many plumes of smoke you saw?
It's only one, from what I could see.
Right. And what colour was it?
I said whitish, greyish. Yeah, that's about all I say. I'm colourblind, so
Right.
white and grey look the same to me.
Okay, thank you. And I think you said a moment ago that it was blowing in an easterly direction, is that right?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Now, when you got to Whitehills Road, as you come up Whitehills Road, there's then a track, a driveway leading to 2 properties at 242 and 244. When you got to the entrance to that track, can you tell His Honour where the truck then went?
The one just off Whitehills Road.
Yes.
We went to 242. We headed towards 242. We might put our nose, put the turn left to 244 and saw Midway Point were there, so we went back down to 242.
Right. Thank you. And when you got to 242, firstly, did you see any other people at that property at the time?
The lady I know as Mel was there. Her boyfriend was there. Can't recall. There's probably a child there as well, or a young adult. I'm not sure.
And what were those 3 people doing? Your observation when you arrived?
Probably interested in what we were doing. Really, not they weren't doing anything.
Right. And were you watching what they were doing, or?
I saw the gentleman put his surfboard in the car, or whatever, and he took off.
Right. With the child?
Can't remember.
Right. Thank you. And so, what happened as you then approached the property and I assume you parked?
Well, I guess we were tasked for asset protection. We parked the vehicle to fill up with water. There's no active firefighting from us from that point.
Right. Now, could I, you'll see, Mr. In fact, you've already seen Mr. Butler, the court can bring documents up on the screen in front of you. Could I ask the operator, please, to bring up document 101? And could we go to photograph 58? Thank you. Now, what you see there, Mr. Butler, is the residence at 242 Whitehills Road. His Honour's had a chance to visit the property. Now, by reference to what you see on the screen there, could you tell His Honour where the 7 Mile Fire Brigade parked its truck when you first arrived at the premises?
On the southern side, towards the back corner of the house.
So that's the back corner as described?
On the southern side of it, yeah.
Right, so the far corner from where this
Far
photograph
corner,
was
yeah,
taken?
yeah. Where it's, pretty much directly behind the house.
All right. Now, firstly, as you parked in that area, can you tell His Honour what, if anything, you saw in terms of burn marks in the area where you were parking?
None.
No?
None, not where we parked.
Okay, so you see that between the far corner of the house, just up from the far corner of the house, there's a long grey line, which I can tell you is an old fallen down log. So in that area on either side of that log, what, if anything, did you observe in terms of signs of fire having passed over that area already?
None.
Right, thank you. Now, while you were at 242 White Hills Road, were you engaged in active fighting activity?
No.
Right. So why was your brigade there?
Asset protection for the house.
Right. Was the house under threat at that time?
I wouldn't have thought so. But, because the fire, as I look at this picture here, looking down at a fairly large, blackened tree, I would suggest the fire was down in that area and the helicopters were water bombing it.
Right. So were the helicopters there by the time you arrived?
We may have been there a bit earlier, yeah.
Right, thank you. Now, during the time that you were there, but the house was not under immediate threat itself.
Nope.
I'm sorry, Mr. Butler?
No, it wasn't, no.
Sorry.
The house wasn't under threat. No.
Right, sorry, thank you.
Not while we were there anyway.
No, understood. So did you have any discussion with the lady, Mel?
Because there's a lack of firefighting being done, for some reason I just went for a bit of a walk and Mel followed me. She was having a yak. She was quite friendly and offered the boys some water and whatnot. And I walked to a black spot and I saw what I consider a V pattern. I said to Mel, did this fire start here? And
Can I just pause you there, Mr. Butler? Can you point out on the photograph what area you're referring to as the start of what you call a V pattern?
The area it's burnt where you can actually see a tree stump, the black and what's left of the tree stump. So the V of the two roads, south of those.
Right, and so you can see there, Mr. Butler, there's some pink lines in the photograph. Do you see that very faintly?
I have seen it on another photo, so yeah.
Okay. And so,
yeah, I do see it, yeah.
Yes, in fact, perhaps the operator could zoom in for us and scroll across so that we can see the. That's it. Lovely. Is that a bit clearer for you, Mr. Butler?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Now, you said that was the start of the V pattern.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
All right. And you said that Mel had followed you across to that area, and could you then tell His Honour, please, what then happened?
I asked Mel if the fire had started here, and she said, I had a farrier up here today who's a cigarette smoker. I said, no, have a look up under here, and that's where I showed her the tree root that was attached to the stump.
Okay. Now, again, just looking at this photograph, can you firstly describe which side of the blackened object that we see there as the tree stump, which side was the root that you just mentioned?
I believe it was on the northern side.
Okay, so that is slightly, effectively on the side from which this photograph is taken, perhaps a bit to the left?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And how close was that root to which you referred?
Well, it looked to me it was at the stump.
Okay, thank you. And how did you first notice the root?
Well, there was obviously smoke come off it, and there seemed to be a hole in the ground.
I'm sorry, I just missed that.
Sorry.
Could you just repeat that for me, please? I just missed that.
I'll go back to what I was trying to think now. Sorry. There's obviously smoke coming off of the tree stump and all the tree root, and there was a hole, and you could look up into the hole, and there was a gap and an opening where a tree root was,
Okay.
or still was burning.
Right. And can you describe for His Honour in as much detail as you can remember what that tree root looked like?
Well, it was whitish, and looked quite hot. Well, obviously you're not going to touch it. And if it got, it was obviously blown. At times you'd see a little glow. You'd see a bit of a glow. It was about 500 mil long and 50, 70 mil in diameter, roughly.
Right. Thank you.
Without measuring it.
Now, you said that Mel had said something about a farrier. Could you explain to His Honour, again in as much detail as you can recall, the course of that conversation that you had with Mel?
Right. I asked Mel, did this fire start here? And she said, we had a farrier up here today, and he was a smoker. And I said, no, have a look up under this tree root. And then she went on to say, my boyfriend had a fire on the stump a few days earlier with one of the children, and she said she was against him lighting it, but then went on to say that sometimes men don't listen too well. And then the conversation tapered off, and I went back to our crew and told them what had just happened.
All right, thank you. And about how long were you at the property at 242 Whitehills Road?
Look, I think it's about an hour and a half.
Did you have any further discussion with Mel or anybody else?
No. No.
Right, thank you. And after, what caused you to leave 242?
We were redeployed to down. I think the fire had made its way down towards shy of Cobbing Tip turnoff. We're redeployed down there for the rest of the evening.
Right, so did you say the Cobbing Tip turnoff?
Yeah, obviously it was on the left-hand side, opposite side of the road, yeah.
And that's further east along the Arthur Highway, past Gangels Road and past Motherwell Bonnet.
And thinking that was fairly benign where we were, so we thought it was quite safe for the time being.
All right, thank you. And at the time that you were at 242 Whitehills Road, again looking by reference to this photograph, the area to the right of the tree stump and to the left of the grey log that we referred to earlier, did you observe whether there were any signs as to whether that area had been burned?
I don't believe so, because we would have put water on it.
Right, thank you.
And with that.
All right, thank you. Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Reid.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Butler, do you recall that when you were there you could see flames slowly coming up the gully in the southern point of the property?
There would have been flames coming up the gully some stage, yeah.
No, the question is not would have been.
Right.
Do you remember seeing it?
That's what the chopper was there for, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, now can we look at this photograph that we've got at the moment? Does that show the southern side of the gully?
Yes.
Perhaps if we minimise it a bit.
It shows the southern side of the gully, but
we might minimise it. So
It's almost right down.
yes, it is. Did we? Yes, that's got it down. Now, you saw flames slowly coming up the gully in the southern point. Is that correct?
And or across.
And or across. Right. Which way across?
Well, the fire wouldn't actually burn up the hill, but it would also go back as well. So it was doing both, I'd suggest.
Well, sorry, just by looking at the photograph, if you can help us, please. You've parked behind the house, and that's the southern. You've parked it on the back of the house. That's the southern side of the house.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Yep. And you parked there to get water out of the swimming pool.
Yep.
Right. Now, when you talk about the gully in the southern point of the property,
yep,
you're talking about something further south from where your truck was.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And to the right of that photograph clearly is the west, and to the left is the east.
Yes.
And when you say coming across, it was coming across from the east to the west, was it?
Slow. In my summation, it would have been slowly creeping along that way.
Right. And it was coming up the gully in the southern point. It was coming towards the house, was it?
No, I wasn't coming towards the house
Not
there.
towards the house, no. Where was it moving?
It would have been, if I look at the tree stump, from my memory, it was down in the gully below there, behind the tree line.
Right. Do we have a laser pointer?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, I made inquiries about that, and the laser pointer apparently won't work on a glossy television screen. So the only alternative is a long stick.
I don't think the witness would like a long stick, Your Honour. So I'm just struggling to really understand what you...
Can I explain in my terms?
Yes, please.
When the chopper's dropping water, you don't actually get a really great gauge of totally where it is, because he's down in the gully and we're up there. So he's dropping it in the gully down there somewhere. Right. And I can't pinpoint exactly where it was.
What could happen is you could ask Ms. Law to move the cursor about to a point where Mr.
Yeah, go a bit more left. Yeah, so look, it was somewhere in around there.
Right.
That's what I think I can remember.
And moving slowly to the west through there.
Well, a fire normally backs back a little at times, yeah, so, yes.
And just for the transcript, Mr. Reid, that's the witness is indicating a point slightly to the left of the tall blackened tree in the middle of the photograph.
Thank you, Your Honour. Yes, thank you. Now, in your resume, the list of courses that you've done, there's a course called Respond to Wildfire.
Yes.
Do you remember undertaking that course?
It's a long time ago. I probably remember parts of it, yeah.
Right. Could we have document 108 up, please? Do you remember that was the resource that you were given at that course?
I couldn't argue not, no? Okay, yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Yes. Okay, yes.
No. Can't argue with that?
No, can't argue with that.
Yeah.
But you think it was?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, do you agree that the fire that you'd seen, where you described this V pattern, was a grass fire? You defined it as a grass fire, not a wildlife fire.
Well, it would be defined as a grass fire once it ignited, yeah, and then turned into a bushfire.
Right. Well, can we have a look at Bates 159, please? Now, you found this to be a reliable resource that you were given, didn't you?
It's a rule of thumb method, yeah.
Yep. And do you see there, that document describes the head and flank and back of fires, and that's typically what you'd expect in a grass fire, isn't it?
Almost. Yeah, you would.
Well, could we have a look, please, at document 109? 1624. And do you agree that that's a typical V pattern shown in the tops of trees?
Well, quite possibly, but there again, I'm not a fire investigator either.
No. Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah. Really, this next question might be fairly easy for you in that case. You're not able to point to any literature or learning to suggest that V patterns exist in grass fires, are you?
Everything that has an ignition point has to start somewhere and it gradually gets wider.
Yeah, but it'll usually be a U shape, a cigar shape.
Yeah. I guess the conversation we've had with the fire service, they call it a V pattern.
But if we just go back, please, to document 108159, You would expect the shape to be more like the shape shown on that page, wouldn't you?
Oh, well, this one I think it was a lot thinner than that because there wasn't much to burn for a start.
Right.
And it was blowing 40 knots, so it doesn't have the time to spread that far. First of all, that'll burn back a little bit later. So if that started at that point there, to go like that in a small V pattern, and then it'd probably come back on with a 40 knot wind, and there wasn't much grass there to burn.
That's a convenient time, Your Honour. I can continue, but...
No, that's a convenient time as far as the court's concerned. So Mr. Butler understands that he may have to come back on, well, will have to come back on Monday.
And I'll give Mr. Butler the usual caution, Your Honour. As well.
Yes, thank you. All right then, Mr. Butler, thanks very much. We're not sitting tomorrow, but we're resuming at 10 o'clock on Monday morning, and we'll see you then.
Okay.
Court will adjourn until 10 o'clock Monday.
Stand, please. This honourable court now stands adjourned.